Parents died in an accident, and their will was read. My sister got a mansion, jewelry, and a fortune. I got an old barn. She laughed. This trash suits you. Days later, while cleaning, I found a strange metal plate on the floor. I lifted it and discovered a hidden staircase leading underground. The sky over Austin, Texas was gray, and the rain the weather forecast had predicted finally began to fall. Betty Harrison gazed out the window and sighed deeply. Whenever she thought of her childhood home, girlish emotions welled up inside her. It was a complex mixture of love and pain. Can you check this manuscript today? A voice called from across the office, and Betty was pulled back to reality. She worked as an editor at a small publishing house called Magnolia Publishing, where she spent her days reviewing manuscripts from local new writers with her red pen. The work was busy but fulfilling. Polishing stories and helping writers bloom was her purpose in life. Of course, I'll get to it now. Betty smiled at her colleague and opened a new manuscript file. Her cell phone rang, displaying her sister's name. Ashley was one of the most successful real estate agents in town. Betty hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should answer. Conversations with Ashley always drained her energy. But family was family. Betty took a deep breath and answered the phone. Betty? Are you coming to Mom and Dad's? Don't tell me you've forgotten about the family dinner this weekend. Ashley's voice was bright but somewhat overbearing. Of course I haven't forgotten, Betty replied quietly. Ever since Ashley was born, Betty's life had been filled with responsibilities as the big sister. She was expected to be the good child, responsible, and the one who supported the family. After hanging up, Betty glanced at the picture frame on her desk. It displayed a family photo of the Harrisons, Robert and Eleanor, and the two sisters. In every picture, Ashley stood in the center with their parents' hands on her shoulders. Betty always stood at the edge, smiling. That was the composition of their family. Ashley in the spotlight, Betty watching from the shadows. From a young age, their parents had given Ashley special attention. When Ashley performed at a piano recital, their father recorded from the front row while their mother shed tears of joy. When Ashley made the honor roll in high school, they celebrated with a family vacation. Meanwhile, Betty's academic excellence and graduation with honors from college were taken for granted. You've always been such a hard worker was all she heard, casually mentioned. Betty never felt unloved. Her parents loved her just in a different way. She was stable, reliable, and never caused problems. Her successes were treated as expected, her struggles considered minor. Ashley was different. She drew attention wherever she went and was always special in her parents' eyes. She grew up pampered, accustomed to getting whatever she wanted. As a result, she became selfish and sometimes brutally frank. She's just passionate, their mother would often say. There was always an excuse when Ashley started arguments or had emotional outbursts. Betty gazed again at the rain outside. She had rarely voiced complaints about her family. It wasn't in her nature. Betty was always the peacekeeper, the one who avoided conflict. Still, deep down, she was hurt by the unfairness. Carrying the pain of not being understood, she silently endured and continued to love her family. Thunder rumbled, and the office lights flickered momentarily. Betty tried to focus on the manuscript, but her mind was filled with thoughts of Ashley and their parents. The weekend family dinner would surely revolve around Ashley's recent big real estate deal. Her mother would proudly talk about Ashley's success, and her father would toast to her. And Betty would smile, applaud, and say, "I'm proud of my sister." That was her role. As always. What Betty could never have imagined was that the family dinner would never happen. The next afternoon, her office phone rang, and a solemn police officer's voice informed her of her parents' car accident. Hydroplaning on the rain-soaked road. Drifting into oncoming traffic. They died instantly, she was told. In an instant, Betty's world collapsed. She moved automatically, taking care of all necessary arrangements. Organizing the funeral, supporting Ashley, contacting relatives. As always, she shouldered the responsibility and moved forward. A week after the funeral, Betty and Ashley sat in the imposing conference room of the Davis law firm. May sunlight streamed through the windows, bathing the oak table in golden light, but the atmosphere in the room was heavy. Betty, nervously adjusting the sleeve of her black dress, stared at attorney James Davis. He was a longtime friend of their father Robert, and the executor of the family will. Ashley sat cross-legged in the chair beside her, occasionally glancing at her watch. Since immediately after the funeral, all she had talked about was moving on. Now, I will read the will of Robert and Eleanor Harrison. Davis adjusted his glasses on his nose and pulled out official documents from a folder. Betty took a breath and leaned forward. She knew her parents had made a will, but they had never discussed its contents. First, regarding real estate, Davis cleared his throat. The Harrison family mansion, including all furniture and household goods, is bequeathed to daughter Ashley Elizabeth Harrison. Ashley made a small fist pump and smiled. It seemed to be what she had expected. Betty frowned in confusion but remained silent. Next, the 2022 Mercedes-Benz in Robert Harrison's name, and the 2023 in Eleanor Harrison's name, are bequeathed to Ashley Elizabeth Harrison. Ashley nodded with satisfaction. Betty clasped her hands on her knees, gripping so tightly that her knuckles turned white. As for the Harrison couple's precious metal collection, artwork and bank account assets, Davis hesitated momentarily. These are all also bequeathed to Ashley Elizabeth Harrison. Silence fell over the conference room. Betty felt lightheaded. Everything? Was nothing left for her? Was this the final message from her parents? Was she truly that worthless to her family? Davis looked at her with sympathy. To Betty and Harrison is bequeathed the Harrison family land plot C7, commonly known as the Old Barn, and the surrounding half-acre of land. Betty blinked. The Old Barn? Was that the warehouse at the edge of her parents' vast property that hadn't been used for years? There's a personal note from Robert about this. Davis took out another piece of paper to Betty. This barn holds special meaning for you. I believe it is exactly what suits you. An unpleasant laugh echoed in the conference room. It was Ashley. She brushed back her hair and looked down at Betty with a malicious smile. This trash is perfect for you, Ashley said laughingly. Always plain and unremarkable. It suits you perfectly. Betty felt a pain in her chest. Her sister's words stabbed at her heart. Why had her parents done this? Why had they excluded her in such a way? Davis looked displeased. Ashley, that's inappropriate. But Ashley continued. What special meaning? That place is just a warehouse full of decaying junk. It has no value. Betty quietly stood up and took the barn keys from Davis. She made a desperate effort not to show her emotions. Thank you, Mr. Davis. I respect my parents' wishes. Leaving the conference room, Betty encountered several relatives in the hallway. Their expressions showed sympathy. Everyone seemed to know the contents of the will. Aunt Mary gently squeezed her arm and whispered, It's all right, dear. When she reached the parking lot, Betty finally released her emotions. Closing the car door and resting her forehead on the steering wheel, hot tears flowed. With trembling hands, she took the barn key from her handbag and stared at it. The old brass key felt cold and heavy. A few days later, Betty decided to visit the barn. Located on the edge of her parents' vast property, it was a place she had rarely approached since childhood. The wooden exterior walls were faded from the elements, and parts of the roof needed repair. When she turned the key, the heavy door creaked open. Inside was dusty, and the air smelled of old wood and metal. Lights streaming through the windows cast various shadows on the floor. What a place, Betty murmured. The barn was filled with old farm equipment, unused furniture, and cardboard boxes. Her shoulders slumped. Was Ashley right after all? Was this truly just a worthless pile of junk? But her father's words echoed in her mind. Something with special meaning for you. She looked around. There must be something here, something meant for her. Betty rolled up her sleeves and began sorting through the old items one by one. She moved boxes, removed sheets, and cleared shelves. After several hours of work, she noticed something strange in the center of the floor. Wiping away the dust, she uncovered a metal plate embedded in the floor. It was about 1 meter square and clearly different from the regular floorboards. Betty knelt and traced the edge of the metal plate with her fingers. There was a slight gap, and a small metal ring was attached in one spot like a handle. Driven by curiosity, she pulled the ring. At first it didn't move, but with a little force, the metal plate slowly lifted. Betty gasped. Before her eyes appeared a staircase leading underground. Wooden stairs disappearing into darkness. She took out a flashlight and directed the light toward the stairs. A doorway to another world had opened. Betty took the first step with trembling legs. As she descended the stairs, her heartbeat quickened. After descending about a dozen steps, she reached a surprisingly spacious underground room. She flipped a switch attached to the wall, and the entire room was brightly illuminated. There were neatly arranged bookshelves, file cabinets, and a large wooden desk in the center. The room was surprisingly clean, showing signs of regular maintenance. A single envelope was placed on the desk. It was addressed to Betty. With trembling hands, she opened the seal, and a letter appeared. It was in her father's handwriting. Betty unfolded her father's letter with shaking hands. The paper carried a faint scent of her father's aftershave. Dear Betty, if you are reading this letter, it means you have found our true legacy. This room is the real treasure of the Harrison family, a place where our souls reside, hidden from the outside world. There is a reason I left you this barn. I believe that only you, not Ashley, can understand the value of this room. Please explore everything in this basement. Then you will understand the reasons for our decision. With eternal love, Dad. Betty clutched the letter to her chest, holding back tears. Her father's words were filled with warmth and trust. She looked around. What was this true treasure of the Harrison family? bookshelves reaching the ceiling lined the walls, and file cabinets were neatly arranged. But what caught her eye most was the multitude of family photographs covering an entire wall. Many were photos she had never seen before. Betty approached one photograph. It was from her 11th birthday party, a picture not included in the official family album, capturing the moment her father embraced her and kissed her cheek. Pure joy shone on her face. Next to it was a photo from when she won first prize in a high school literary contest. There had only been a small celebration at home, but in this picture, her father proudly had his arm around her shoulder, and her mother was teary-eyed. So many. Betty gasped. All the important moments of her life were recorded here. Even if they weren't publicly celebrated, her parents had certainly cherished her successes and growth. In the center of the room were two large wooden boxes. One was engraved with Ashley and the other with Betty. She approached the box with her name and carefully opened the lid. Inside were neatly arranged records documenting her life, from elementary school report cards to her college diploma. What particularly caught her eye was a thick file titled, Betty's Contributions. Opening the file, she found records written in her father's handwriting. Records of how 14-year-old Betty took over all the housework when her mother was hospitalized. Records of how she helped with her father's work and assisted in overcoming a company financial crisis. Records of how she repeatedly helped Ashley with homework and quietly supported her sister when she stumbled. Betty is the pillar that supports the family from places that don't stand out, her father had written. Without her strength and patience, this family would not function. Wiping away tears, Betty also glanced at Ashley's box. As a sister, she felt she shouldn't invade her sister's privacy. But her father had said he wanted her to see everything. Nervously, she opened the box. Ashley's box contained not only records of her outward successes and awards, but also materials Betty knew nothing about. Medical records from Ashley's teenage years, psychiatrist diagnoses, treatment records for depression and anxiety disorders, and most shocking were photographs of self-harm and records of emergency hospital transports. Ashley, no way. Betty flipped through these records with trembling hands. There were also copies of Ashley's diary from when she was 16. Everyone thinks I'm perfect. But if they knew the real me, they would surely be disappointed. I'm a fake. I always have to show a smile. But inside, I'm empty. I wish I were like Betty. She's always dignified and genuine. Betty collapsed into a chair. Who would have thought that behind Ashley's glamorous appearance lay such deep suffering? Their parents had always given Ashley special treatment to protect her fragile mental state and continuously supported her self-esteem. On the opposite side of the room were more file cabinets. Betty opened them one by one and checked their contents. Dozens of her father's diaries were stored there. She picked up the most recent one and opened it to the last page. Today, I made the final changes to the will. I decided to leave all material things to Ashley and the barn to Betty. It will seem unfair to the world. Betty herself will surely be hurt. But I believe this decision is right. Ashley has always sought validation from the outside and material proof. Her emotional wounds are deep, and she continues to seek self-worth externally. This is partly our responsibility. To protect her fragility, we have excessively praised her and filled her with material things. Betty is different. She has strength that shines from within. She is a person who seeks truth and meaning rather than material value. That's why I want to entrust her with our true legacy. The memories and truths packed into this room. The family's history and wisdom. And above all, our hearts. She may be hurt, but she will surely find this place and understand everything. And she has the power to heal the emptiness Ashley will feel after being materially fulfilled. Fulfilled. The sisters need each other. This is my last wish, that they find a true bond. Betty closed the diary and exhaled deeply. Everything was starting to connect. The true reasons behind her parents' actions, the special treatment of Ashley, and the expectations placed on her. As she continued exploring, she also found her mother's journal. It documented deep love for the children and concern for Ashley's condition. Her mother had stayed up countless nights praying for Ashley and taken her to specialists. Betty is our strength, her mother had written. She always prioritizes others over herself. Sometimes I feel guilty towards her. I think we should pay more attention to her. But she always smiles and says, "It's okay, Mom." While being saved by her strength, my heart aches that we take it for granted. In the corner of the room was another desk with a large binder labeled Harrison Project. Betty opened it and discovered records of charitable activities her parents had secretly been pursuing. Scholarships for local children, homeless support, and especially moving was a secret support program for young people with mental health issues. Attached was a note that read, "So they don't end up like Ashley." Her parents had learned from Ashley's experience and were trying to help young people with similar struggles. Betty sat down in a chair and looked around the room. Here was recorded not the outward appearance of the Harrison family, but its true face. Not a perfect family, but the story of imperfect humans, each with their own wounds and strengths, trying to support each other. Dad, Mom, Betty murmured. Thank you, I understand now. This barn and basement were indeed a treasure beyond material value, a priceless asset of truth and family memories that money couldn't buy. Betty began to understand that she had been chosen as the true heir. But shouldn't Ashley also know this truth? Did she know about the existence of this place? Should she tell her sister about their parents' true feelings? Betty stood up and looked around the room once more before turning off the lights. This discovery had changed her life. And it would change her relationship with Ashley as well. A week passed. Betty had mulled over the truth she found in the basement many times in her mind. She had barely been in contact with Ashley since the funeral. Brief messages from her sister were practical, with no emotional exchange. On a rainy Saturday, as Betty was checking work emails while drinking coffee at home, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Opening the door, there stood Ashley, dressed in perfect makeup and an expensive designer coat, with her usual confident appearance. But there was something different in her eyes. Fatigue, or perhaps anxiety. May I come in? Ashley asked. Betty silently moved aside and invited her sister in. What do you need? Betty asked calmly. The words "this trash is perfect for you" from that day still lingered in her heart. Ashley sat on the sofa and took out documents from her luxury handbag. About that barn, I had a real estate company appraise it. The land itself has some value. If you sell it, you could get some money. I'm not planning to sell it, Betty answered immediately. Ashley raised an eyebrow. But it has value. What are you going to use that decaying barn for? Betty quietly replied, I already know its value. What are you talking about? Ashley tilted her head. What value could that pile of junk have? At that moment, Betty made up her mind. She picked up the barn key from the table and showed it to Ashley. There's something I want to show you. Want to go together? Ashley was clearly confused, but curiosity seemed to win out. What is it? Don't tell me there's treasure buried in that barn, she said half-jokingly. In a way, yes, Betty smiled quietly. They drove to the barn in separate cars. Upon arrival, Ashley made no effort to hide her disgust as she looked at the building. Is there really something here? Betty silently entered the barn and lifted the metal plate to reveal the stairs leading underground. A look of surprise crossed Ashley's face. What's this? I didn't know about this. I didn't know until a week ago either, Betty replied and began descending the stairs. Ashley followed. When the lights came on in the basement, Ashley gasped. She was at a loss for words, staring at the wall of family photographs. It's the Harrison family record room. The true legacy left by Mom and Dad, Betty explained. The truth about our family is stored here. Ashley walked around the room, looking at the photos and bookshelves. Then she noticed the box with her name carved on it. What's this? See for yourself, Betty said quietly. Ashley opened the box, and the moment she saw its contents, her expression changed. Her past treatment records, diaries, and evidence of self-harm were neatly stored there. What is this? Her voice trembled. This is an invasion of privacy. How could such things? Mom and Dad knew, Betty said gently. All your suffering, my secrets like this. Ashley cried out with a mixture of anger and shame. Who saw this? Who did you tell? I haven't told anyone, Betty answered quietly. I only found out recently myself. Mom and Dad kept this secret to protect you. Tears welled up in Ashley's eyes. I can't believe it. After seeing this, what do you think of me? Weak, broken? No. Betty approached her sister. Seeing this, I finally understand you. Ashley stared at Betty with confused eyes. Betty took their father's diary and read aloud the parts about Ashley. The real reasons their parents had given Ashley special treatment. The numerous decisions they had made to protect her mental state and support her self-esteem. They, just to protect me? Ashley displayed an expression of disbelief. Betty nodded and now took out a file titled Ashley's Kindness. Look at this too. The file documented moments when Ashley had unknowingly helped family and others. How she had secretly contributed savings for their father's medical expenses. How she had delivered flowers to the hospital every day when Betty was sick. How she had anonymously given scholarships to neighborhood children. This? Me? Ashley's voice was small. Mom and Dad knew? They saw everything, Betty answered with a smile. Your suffering, your strength, your kindness. A long silence fell over the room. Ashley sat down in a chair and covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders began to shake. She was crying. I was always scared, really, Ashley confessed in a trembling voice. Feeling like I wasn't enough. So I always had to be perfect. Betty sat next to her sister and gently put an arm around her. I know, now. My bad attitude, my mean words. I'm sorry for hurting you. Ashley looked up with red eyes at Betty. You were always strong, never shaken by anything. I was jealous. I was just pretending to be strong, Betty answered honestly. I was hurt that you always got the attention while I was hidden in the shadows, but now I understand. We were just suffering in different ways. Ashley picked up the siblings' special folder, and they began to go through it together. It documented the intersections of their lives, moments when they supported each other, and their parents' deep love. They were wonderful parents, weren't they? Ashley murmured. In ways we never knew, they did so much. They weren't perfect parents, Betty said quietly, but they did their best. The two spent hours in that basement, reading records, sharing memories, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. Hearts that had been closed for a long time gradually opened. What now? Ashley finally asked. This place, these records, Betty smiled. This is our true inheritance. Let's protect it together. Ashley took Betty's hand and squeezed it firmly. Together, she agreed. I'm sorry I said we should sell this barn. It's a special place. The sisters climbed the stairs and returned to the outside light. The sky was clear, and the sun bathed the old wooden barn in golden light. They stood side by side, feeling the beginning of a new understanding and reconciliation in the silence. A year later, the barn had been completely transformed. The weather-beaten old exterior walls had been repainted, the roof repaired, and large windows added. A warm wooden sign that read Harrison Books and Cafe hung at the entrance. We've got more customers again today, Ashley called from behind the counter. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore a simple apron. The flashy jewelry and expensive brand name outfits from before had disappeared. Betty paused from organizing the bookshelves and responded with a smile. The local writers' circle is coming today, so we need to prepare. This small publishing cafe they had opened had become a popular spot in the community. Ashley used her real estate knowledge to manage the place and handle the business side, while Betty used her editing experience to support local writers. A small publishing space was also set up in one corner of the cafe, becoming a base for writers dreaming of self-publishing. The basement was preserved as the Harrison family record room, a special place just for the two of them. Sometimes after work, they would go down to the basement, drink wine while reading their parents' records, and share memories. How was therapy today? Betty asked while making coffee. Ashley smiled a bit shyly. It was good. Dr. Reed praised my progress. A few months after their reconciliation, Ashley had started psychotherapy. She faced her inner self and gradually released her attachment to appearances and materialism. Even more surprisingly, she had begun to publicly share her past issues, and was now speaking at mental health awareness events at local high schools. Will you look at the draft for next week's speech? Ashley asked while opening her laptop. I'm still a bit anxious. Of course, Betty answered kindly. But your words are strong enough. Have confidence now. Sunlight streaming through the cafe windows warmly illuminated them both. Photos of their parents decorated the wall, and next to them hung new pictures of the sisters, Betty and Ashley, smiling with their shoulders touching. Their expressions showed a natural warmth that hadn't been seen before. I sometimes think, Ashley said, holding her coffee cup with both hands, what would have happened to us if Mom and Dad had divided the inheritance normally? We probably wouldn't have the relationship we have now, Betty answered frankly. I would still be silently enduring, and you would still be measuring your worth by possessions. Ashley nodded. They were thinking of us until the very end, weren't they? Yes. Their true legacy wasn't this building or money, Betty said. It was the heart that values family bonds and truth. The cafe door opened, and the first customer entered. The sisters stood up with smiles and exchanged glances. Peace and understanding that would have been unimaginable a year ago now dwelled in their eyes. Well, shall we begin? Betty said. Ashley nodded and replied, yes, together. The old barn now serves as the stage for a new story, like a lighthouse guarding lost family memories while illuminating a new path toward the future.